What's the dumbest myth people today believe? Story 1. There are dumber ones out there, but the one I, as an estate lawyer, deal with constantly is the idea that there needs to be a reading of the will, where the family all gather and the lawyer reads it aloud to them for the first time. We don't do that, we just mail everyone their own copy if they want it. It's a really stubbornly persistent one because people continue to see scenes of it in movies and TV shows, where it's used for some big dramatic reveal. I've even had irate beneficiaries insist that the administration of the estate can't be official until there's a reading. Way back, like 150 years ago or so, I believe we used to do something like that at times because you couldn't exactly presume literacy on the part of the beneficiaries, but now we feel it's a pretty safe bet that you can either read it or find someone who can. Story 2 TBF. That doesn't always mean eating less or moving more is the only solution, as is often stated by the calorie deficit is the only way. Proponents, for example, if you have hypothyroidism and you get it corrected, you'll lose weight without ever changing your caloric intake or movement. Similar with insulin resistance. Also, if you have excessive salt in your diet, reducing that will also cause weight loss without changing your caloric intake, because you may have been holding on to a lot of water weight, and there are other things that impact your metabolism, which can impact your calorie expenditure without changing your routine, e.g., different types of food, even if it's the same amount of calories, may impact your metabolism. For example, in this study, the low carbohydrate non-calorie restricted group lost more weight than the calorie restricted low-fat group. Story 3. That the wealthy create jobs. It's all a misdirection to get people to oppose tax increases on corporations and the wealthy. As if higher taxes would make greedy people think, well, fuck it, I guess I just won't try to be rich anymore. In reality, work has always existed, and the wealthy have done nothing more than figure out ways to harness, scale, and exploit labor to create wealth. It goes back thousands of years. Some of the earliest examples would be the way Roman elites slowly took over the common farmlands of Italy, known as the Ager Publicus, as Rome's repeated wars with their neighbors, some aggressive, some defensive, led the citizen soldiers to either die or be gone so long their farms fell into disrepair and leave them in debt. The wealthy elites would buy up these farms. This was actually illegal to own more than a certain amount of the Ager Publicus, but the laws often weren't sufficiently enforced, and there were often violent reactions to land reform attempts to redistribute them back. Wealthy people influencing politics to get around regulation? Who'd have thought? Of course, sometimes they literally just did it with violent mobs, such as when the Gracchus brothers were murdered, because Rome was successful most of the time, and enslaving the losers was a common practice among European cultures of the time. Slowly but surely the family farms were replaced by sprawling megafarms worked by slaves. This made the Roman elites incredibly rich. Their 1% was almost 10 times wealthier by proportion than ours, and filled Rome with the dispossessed and unemployed, to the point they had to institute welfare-type programs just to feed them and prevent uprisings. Story 3. But the bottom line is that none of those elites create work. The farm work existed before the megafarms did. The wealthy Romans just cut costs by using slave labor to replace wage labor, and modern firms like Amazon are no different. Did Jeff Bezos create any jobs? Or did the jobs for local bookstores and other small businesses, and the decentralized distribution methods slowly disappear as those companies went out of business due to Amazon, and end up created at Amazon? The reality is that labor force participation rates have held pretty steady, suggesting that work always exists. It is only the names of the bosses that change. The LFPR in January was only about 3 points higher than in 1960, and 0.4 points below the average since 1948. Workers create wealth. Not the other way around, and always have. If you came up with $1 billion idea, but never managed to utilize enough workers to make that idea into a reality, all you ever had was an idea. The labor created your wealth, and you simply apportioned a high enough percentage of the output to become a billionaire. Story 4. That people understand what reality is. 200 years ago, most people in the West believed there really was an old man in the sky called God controlling the universe. Medical science was based on the 4 humors: Nobody knew what an atom was. The Earth was 4,000 years old and created in 6 days. Women were really chattels to be exchanged between families through marriage to bear children and serve men through domestic and sexual servitude. People with high foreheads were born criminals. Machines heavier than air cannot fly. That if you traveled faster than the speed of a galloping horse you would suffocate and die. The legs of furniture such as tables and chairs needed to be covered to prevent sinful and lustful thoughts. People with epilepsy and mental health issues were possessed by the devil or demons and dangerous to everyone else. So what? In the space of just 200 years we've just managed to figure everything out and understand reality. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody. Most people can't even understand half the shit going on in their lives. Life and the universe is a great deal more mysterious than we all think it is. Story 5. I'm late to the party, but this one is for parents. Don't hold your baby too much when they cry, it'll spoil them. In the first year of life, that baby doesn't understand being spoiled, they need to feel safe and secure. By not holding them every single time they cry, you will spoil them because they will develop anxiety due to not knowing when you'll come back. Object permanence isn't developed fully until 8 months or so. They'll believe you're never coming back every time you leave. When my daughter was a year old, I would take her to her room for a nap and give her a bottle, then come back out to the living room to talk to my friends. Most of them say things like, "Oh my God, she doesn't cry when you leave? My kids will not let me leave until they're asleep." No, she doesn't, because she knows that if she's scared or uncomfortable, mom or dad is a cry away. She feels comfortable being left alone because we showed her that she will always have someone there if things go wrong. If you don't want your kid to be spoiled, it is imperative to hold them or be with them every single time they cry in that first year. Story 6. That people in Columbus's time believed the world was flat. They knew it was round. As a matter of fact, the reason no one wanted to fund his expedition to reach Asia was because they all had a much better idea of the circumference of the Earth than Columbus did. They all told him he was absolutely mad, not because they thought he would fall off the edge of the world, but because they correctly calculated that no contemporary ship could possibly survive a trip from Western Europe through empty ocean all the way to Asia. No one, at least no one in Columbus's world, knew the Americas existed. The premise behind Columbus's expedition was absolutely wrong, but he was lucky. If he hadn't blundered into a giant, non-Asian landmass, he would certainly have been lost at sea. Story 7. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do, every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place, full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish, where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you. He loves you, and he needs money. He always needs money. He's all-powerful, all-perfect, all-knowing, and all-wise, somehow just can't handle money. Story 8. That Donald Trump is anything but low-IQ'd, lying, stealing, misogynistic, racist, hypocritical bigot who will put himself being right over the health, well-being and actual lives of the people he took an oath to serve. How the man is not waiting execution for being an absolute traitor to our country, for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of COVID victims, and his entire life of criminal activity. If you believe the myth he's anything but that, I challenge you to go 2 weeks with 0 FUX News, 0 Talk Radio, and 0 right-wing websites. No Newsmax either. You don't have to watch anything like MSNBC unless you want to. Just don't watch anything for 2 weeks. If, at the end of the 2 weeks, you don't find yourself not angry all the time and color has returned to the world and you might have the slightest crack in your Trump reality, and the spell you've been under, then I'll eat a mega hat. Prepared by my choosing.